but whatever we do is good. And Gavin's got to work. Appreciate both of you.
Then you just go ahead. You start, Damon. We'll do mine tomorrow then.
Um,
Sometimes it can be like 10 minutes.
Okay, so let's just go into it, but then we add you, and I'm not uploading the share, I'm joining it with the other, but you must speak tomorrow. And in fact, what we'll do is tomorrow, Kev, we'll add the Gemara share, because it's weird to have a Gemara share, then the teaching in between, and then the Gemara share. At the end tomorrow, we're going to give you like 10 minutes, 8 minutes, or whatever. So just prepare for tomorrow night.
I'll try. Just I hope I
Okay.
have to do a bit of work tonight. So yeah, I hope I get it. Yeah, cool. Okay.
All right. So there was a fifth ruling by Rava. Last night we did the fourth ruling by Rava, and then the confirmation of Ravina about the techum and using animals in a pen to breed the nitrogen levels for compost, etc., with the dung. Anyway, this speaking of the techum, we're dealing with the fifth ruling by Rava, who says. Some say it's Rava, by the way. Some say it was Rav Huna in the name of Rava. And they basically say, look, those going up from Babylonia up to Eretz Israel and those going down from Eretz Israel to Babylonia should know the following law. Okay. And what's the law? If a Jew has testimony for a Kuthian but was not asked to testify, and he goes to testify in a Kuthian court whose laws are different from a Jewish court against his fellow Jew, he's excommunicated. Now, it's not just what you think about going to non-Jewish authorities. It's a bit more complicated than that. And I'll go through it. So basically, this Gemara refers to a case in which the witness's testimony is effective only under Kuthian law and not Jewish law. Why? Because by testifying in a Kuthian court, the witness causes the Jew a loss he would not have suffered had the case been tried in a Jewish court. It was only that this Jew could be convicted under Kuthian law. I'm going to explain why. But this is the kicker. If his testimony would be effective under both Jewish and Kuthian law to convict the Jew, it's permissible to go either to a Jewish or non-Jewish court. And in fact, it goes further than being permissible. It's actually commendable, because he has to testify on behalf of a Kuthian against a Jew. You might say, well, how's that commendable? Because the Gemara says that justice has to be served, and there are circumstances where if the laws are like the Dreyfus case or are there punitively against the Jew, there's no way a Jew can tell on another Jew. But if it's a court of law, and this Jew is creating a chilul, and it can be identified as a frum Jew and maybe as a fraudster, and another Jew can come up and say, listen, he's been robbing people all over town, Jews and non-Jews, and they put a stop to it. It's not only permissible, it's commendable, because it offsets the chilul Hashem with the kiddush Hashem. So people say, hey, Jews are people too. Good ones, they're bad ones. It's not just a Jewish thing. But there are certain stringencies that apply. But listen, although the Gemara says that the two litigants are Jewish, and the Kuthian there's a Kuthian, the same law applies where both are Jews. What do you mean? So it means that whether a Jew is on trial, what's a Jew suing another Jew? Listen, basically the critical point is that the witness made a fellow Jew suffer a loss not warranted under Torah law. That's the issue. So it doesn't matter whether the beneficiary is a Kuthian or a Jew. Kevin, or do you call them Kuthians or Kuthians? I don't know.
Yeah, Kuthians, you said, yeah.
Yeah, I think
Kuthians.
because the term is uncouth. Where do you get?
Maybe it comes from there.
Maybe it does.
Because in Hebrew you say kutim.
Kutim. So let's use the term kutim. So
Kutim is Kuth. Yeah, that sounds. Yeah, Kuthian sounds very like Old New Testament-ish style. Yeah,
that? It does. It sounds very Old English, Saxon, New James Version Bible, whatever. It does. Yes. It sounds very
King James.
So, what we are saying here is the critical point is whether the beneficiary, in this case, the plaintiff, is a Jew or a kutim or whatever it is. Kuti. Or kuti. It doesn't matter. That's not the critical point. The critical point is, number one, if a Jew could convict that other Jew under a Jewish court, then he can testify in a Kutim court. But if that Jew would not be able to convict that other Jew in a Jewish court, he cannot testify in a Kuti court, or whatever it is. That sounds crazy, that term Kuti court. Anyway. So
See, then I got it. Why they call him Kuti?
Yeah.
Could he testify? Or couldn't he testify?
Could he testify or couldn't? That's brilliant. Mate, the punniest award goes to you.
Arthur is the king for today of the puns.
Absolutely. And you made Kevin's night as well. Well done.
Yeah.
That's what I do it for. That's all the love I need.
You made Kevin's night. That's why he's known as Arthur of the Round.
Thank you very much, Arthur. Much obliged.
Yeah.
Anytime, Kev. Anytime.
This is nearly the same high as when we won the World Cup rugby. Nearly the same high. Nearly.
Yeah.
You agree, Kevin?
All right. So, guys, just to get on track, the only point the Gemara is trying to make, let's just simplify that, is that if a Jew could convict another Jew in a Jewish court, his witness testimony is equally effective and allowed under both systems of law, a secular court and a religious court. Let's put it like that. I'd rather use that term. Okay? Now, what's the case? Is we're basically saying in a Jewish court, what would happen is the witness would be excommunicated until he pays compensation for the undue loss he caused the Jew to suffer. So, in other words, this is what it's saying, is if a Jew's testimony for a secular court would convict the Jew, but he was not asked to testify, and then he goes to testify in a secular court whose laws are different from halachic law against his fellow Jew, then we're entitled to excommunicate him until he pays the full financial compensation for the loss that he caused the Jew to suffer. So the entire discussion pertains to a witness who is not sure whether the Jew against whom he is testifying is actually liable. In other words, he knows, for example, like the Jew borrowed money from a kuti, but he doesn't know whether or not it's been repaid. So in that case, if it's a suffix, he mustn't get involved. If, however, he knows for a fact that the Jew is liable or he's a fraudster, he is forbidden to withhold his testimony in a secular court, even if it's only effective under a secular court and not a Jewish court. So why would it not be effective in a Jewish court? Because the reason is a secular court is, in those days, today it's different, can exact money from a defendant on the word of one witness. In other words, Jewish law was a bit more evolved, and it says, listen, the reason why you need the testimony of two witnesses to exact money from a defendant, whereas a secular or kutim court suffices with one, is because a single witness is equal to a single defendant. In other words, the majority doesn't rule. If two people at a board meeting outvote the one director and their three directors, the majority rules. If you've got two witnesses that can be corroborated as not having collaborated with each other. So collaboration means they work in partnership with each other, but the corroboration means you check that their testimony is correct, and you question them separately, and you see that it makes sense, then it's not one person's word against another. But in a secular court in those days, you could convict a defendant with one single witness. So therefore, a single witness who testifies against a Jewish defendant in a secular court would cause him a loss not warranted under Jewish law. That's according to Rashi. So evidently, the Gemara speaks of a situation where the kutim is the plaintiff, or the kuti is the plaintiff in this case, and the Jew is the defendant. For obviously, guys, in that case, a single witness's testimony would indeed render the Jewish defendant liable, only under secular law and not under Jewish law. But like in the reverse case, the Jew is the plaintiff and the kuti is the defendant, where the result would be the same in both systems of law. The witness may testify against a Jew even in a secular court. Okay? Because we're saying there it's not a question of whether or not the Jew has not paid back under suspicion. It's evidential that this Jew stole from this kuti. Okay, but the previous ruling has to be qualified. What is that? We don't say this except where he is the only one that can testify. But where two witnesses can testify, since in that case, kutim law is the same as Jewish law. Meaning, if there are two witnesses for the kuti plaintiff, they would cause a Jewish defendant to be found liable under both Jewish law and secular law. In such a case, a Jew may serve as a witness for a kuti against a Jewish defendant, even in a kuti court. Moreover, this is obviously a proper course of action for the witness to take, and heaven will bless him for it, according to the Meiri. So we're saying that there has to be a couple of factors. Number one, you've got to know that the Jew, in fact, has not paid back the kuti. Number two, the reason why you cannot testify against him in a secular court is one witness is enough to convict him in the secular court, but in a Jewish court you would need two, and therefore you've cost this Jew money. So you've got to be very, very careful in this case. And that individual was not asked to testify. He decided to do it of his own volition. Okay. So in that case, you can't do it. Now, the ruling just goes a little bit further, is that even if there's just one witness, we don't say this except where the case is tried by a village court, but not where it's tried by a government court, because they too, as in a Jewish law, rely on one witness only to administer an oath to the defendant and not to exact money. So let me tell you what I'm actually saying here. When we talk about a village court, what you guys have to understand, it's like the Randburg Magistrates Court. You've got what you call the High Court, the Supreme Court. You've got the Constitutional Court. You've got the Small Claims Court. You've got the Magistrates Court. The Magistrate Court is a district court. It's the equivalent of a village court. Okay. And the villages courts lack the same expertise in law in a way compared to the Supreme Court. That can be overruled. So the official kutim courts do not exact money on the testimony of just one witness. So what we are saying is here, when you're dealing with a high court, okay, or the Supreme Court, you, as far as I know, the Supreme Court is above the High Court, by the way. I think it's for death penalty cases. But if you're dealing with not a magistrate's court if you're dealing with a magistrate's court, you can exact money on the testimony of one witness in a secular biblical court. But regarding a high court, it works the same as Jewish law regarding a single witness. Okay, in that they actually require the defendant to take an oath to negate the witness's testimony. So guys, do you know how it works in a Jewish court?
There has to be two witnesses.
Correct. And what?
How you pay the judge? I wasn't sure. Sorry.
No.
Have to be two witnesses have to come forward testifying against.
I know what Arthur's saying. If it's in the South African court, you pay the judge to get off. But we're talking about a reasonable court here. So, guys, basically, if there's one witness tried by a magistrate's court, it's different to a government court, because the government court, or what you call the high court, works like a Jewish court in that they rely on one witness only to administer an oath to the defendant and not to exact money. So what we are saying is here is there could be one person that witnessed the crime in terms of fraud. So the official secular courts biblically don't exact money on the testimony of just one witness. In that way, they work like a Jewish court. But in the Jewish law, they make that defendant take an oath to negate the witness's testimony. So in other words, the Jew says that he did not pay back the kuti. He borrowed the money. He did not pay it back. And basically then the Jewish defendant would have to take an oath using Hashem's name to say that he did pay back. So you can, even in a Jewish court, in a government or a secular court, rely on one witness to force the defendant to take an oath. And it's the same in the Jewish court and the secular court. So in that case, we don't excommunicate the Jew for being a pivotal witness against the other Jew, where it would only have an effect in a secular court, because it doesn't work like that in the high court. Does that make sense, guys?
Say that again. Sorry, just repeat that.
I'm saying, if you take a look at the magistrate's court, you can convict on the testimony of one witness in a secular magistrate's court, a kuti court. But in a Jewish magistrate's court or a village court, you can't convict the defendant on the basis of one Jew's testimony against another. But when you're dealing with a government court or a high court of the kuti, the secular court, both the Jewish law and halachic law, as well as the secular law in the high court, works the same, in that the Jew who is a witness for the kuti plaintiff against the fellow Jew can force that defendant Jew to take an oath that he did pay the money back. And therefore, since that can happen in both a Jewish court and a high court of a non-Jewish court, we don't put that Jew into chayrim until he pays the loss of the defendant Jew, the witness Jew. Because the principle here is, as long as the Jew did not cause a loss to the other Jew by using a secular mechanism compared to a halachic mechanism, there's no reason to make him excommunicated in order to pay the Jewish defendant's debt, because what applied in the Kuthian court applies in the secular court. In other words, a magistrate court, you can convict on the basis of one witness. In a non-Jewish secular court in the biblical times, you could only force that defendant to take an oath using Hashem's name as to the fact that he paid back, which is the same as a Jewish court. Therefore, you didn't cause this Jew any loss that wouldn't have occurred in a halachic based in. So there's no excommunication, and he doesn't have to pay back the debt. So just one thing, and then we finish on this note. So the Gemara poses a question regarding a single witness, according to Rav Ashi. When we were in the academy of Rav Huna, Rav Ashi said, we asked the following question: in the case of a distinguished person on whom the government courts rely, like a group of two witnesses, because this person was had notoriety, he was distinguished in that he was like the pillar of a community, and it's really, we rely on him like two witnesses because he's got that much pull, so to speak. Do we say that they're going to exact money on his word alone? Because should he not testify before them? Meaning that in this respect, the official kuti courts differ from a Jewish court. They accordingly hold weight by the quality of the person testifying. In other words, if the person is distinguished, like a town mayor or the president, he has the status of two ordinary people with his testimony. So a distinguished Jew should not testify on his own against a Jewish defendant in a kuti court, because his testimony would cause a Jew to suffer a loss he would not have sustained under Jewish law, because under Jewish law, as famous as he is and distinguished as he is, he's only seen as one witness. So that's the one way to look at it. The other one, it's saying, Gemara says, perhaps we say that since he is a distinguished person, he can't elude them, and therefore he may testify, which means a distinguished person whose actions are publicly scrutinized would find it very difficult to avoid testifying without desecrating the divine name and circumventing justice. So therefore, guys, he should therefore be allowed to testify, because in that case, he might cause the Jewish defendant an unwarranted loss, but he can't exactly avoid it, because it would seem as if he's siding with the Jew, and he's publicly has the Jewish people's reputation on the line. So he's saying, does he still protect the Jew because his testimony, according to kuti law, is seen as two people, and in the Jewish court as one? Or is he allowed to testify and is he not? And the Gemara says, we don't know. Let it remain unsolved. So in practice, one who finds himself in such a predicament should testify, but we don't know if it's something that he shouldn't try and get out of. Okay, guys, let's end on
Just
that.
a quick question, Damon.
Yeah, sure.
You said Kuti law and Jewish law in a high court is similar. So you're saying, I know in a Jewish court, a witness can force the accused to make an oath. Do you say that also applies in the Kuti court?
Not in the magistrate's court, in the Kuti
in the high court. Oh, so they can also make the.
Yeah,
oh, so they also have.
Correct, and therefore the Jewish witness will not be excommunicated for causing the Jewish defendant a loss, because the same would apply in a Jewish court. He'd only cause him a loss in the magistrate's court because that testimony wouldn't require that Jew to make an oath to defend himself. He would just be convicted. And therefore that's the basis.
What loss are you talking about? What
kind
of loss?
I'm saying the Kuti says that he borrowed 60,000 rand from me. And the Jew said, I paid it back. And the Jewish witness said he never paid it back. He said, well, they asked the Jew, when did you pay it back? I came to your offices last Tuesday. And a Jewish witness says the Kuti couldn't have been paid back because he was with me in Cape Town. What do you mean he was paid back in Joburg? So the Kuti found him and he says to his Jewish friend, he says, listen, I wasn't there to be paid back where this Jew claimed he paid me back on the Tuesday. I was with you in Cape Town. Just testify to that. We got a bill from the bar. We were in Cape Town. We took a flight together. We had a business meeting. Now, this Jew in a Jewish court wouldn't be enough to convict that other Jew, which means if he had to testify against this Jew in a Jewish court, it wouldn't be enough to convict that Jew. It would be enough for that Jew to have to take an oath using Hashem's name. And therefore, if he doesn't want to pay, it's that Jewish defendant's responsibility. But if that Jew goes to a Kuti secular court and on the basis of his testimony costs that Jew 60,000 rand, he's excommunicated until he pays that debt, because he only cost that Jew a loss because his testimony as one person that held water in a Kuti magistrate's court would not hold water in a Jewish court. And that's why we're saying the same is not applicable in a Kuti high court, because what would happen there would trigger the same series of events in a halachic court, in that the Jewish defendant would have to take an oath using Hashem's name. At that point, since this Jew didn't trigger an added cost in a Kuti court as opposed to a Jewish halachic court, there would be no excommunication to this Jewish witness until he paid the debt of the defendant. It's the defendant's problem. Okay. All right, guys, have a good evening. Kevin,
Yeah, yourself.
prepare something.